Hey, welcome to the Backyard Professional Live Show. What? Stop already. Ooh, I've got a wicked delay. Oh, I've got a wicked delay. Oh, this is not good. Hold on. I got to figure this out. Oh, man. Hold on. I've got. What a start, huh? Boy. I've got about a. All right. Here we go. Let's see what's going on. I have a good guest tonight, and I am excited to have him. We are going to. Doug, hold on. I'm going to bring you on. Let's see if we're delayed. How are you?
I'm good.
I can hear you and I can hear myself. I've got like a 10-second delay with my sound.
Yeah, there's a slight lag in your video as well.
What's going on? I recharged it.
You sound okay. I mean, you sound okay.
Yeah. Well, maybe that means I'm going to shut up and you're going to do it.
Yeah. No, you're synced back up. You're doing good. You're synced back up.
Just now hearing. Oh, this is a time delay. It's a double reel. This is crazy.
Weird.
I've never had this experience before.
Okie dokie. You're not breaking up. Am I breaking up?
No, I can hear you, then I can hear you again in 10 seconds. Is that better?
Okay. That's weird.
No.
Are y'all in the audience? Can you hear Kerry twice, or does he sound fine?
If I reboot, it'll take us off stream and we'll have to.
Yeah, Moksha says, Kerry, keep going. So, hi, Dan. And everybody, JB, Mark, Alan, Tim.
Okay, keep talking, Doug. I want to hear if I can hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Wow, that's crazy. Twice.
Sounds fine. Can only hear once. That's what Peter says.
All right, I'll just have to live with it.
Yeah.
Okay, look, we're in for a good night tonight for a very important reason, because this book right here, Second is incredibly crazy. Am I over exaggerating, Doug, if I said this book is appalling?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. This book is one of the top LDS history books I've ever read. It's got to be, it's in the top 5 or 10, probably top 5, I'd say, that I've ever read. It's awesome. I got my copy too.
And we both, of course, scribbled all over creation in it to make our own indexes.
I've got little tabs.
So here's the thing that shocked me the most, I think, about this book at this point in time is evidence shows that there's just no revelation going on in the church. This is all planned out and worked through without any concept of heaven speaking. Is that your impression?
The whole process, once you read the book and you go through the whole process that occurred, it's very much kind of a business-like thing. It reminds you more of reading about a corporation or a company, going through the process with religion kind of overlaid on it. They do pray about things and what have you, things that you would expect them to do, but just the feel of it is it's not miraculous. In other words, it's not like Joseph Smith, like an angel came and this happened. It's very much trying to convince members of the quorum to go along with the will of the prophet.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how much a struggle that you would think that the prophet could come in and say, got a revelation, we're going to do this, that's it, and that they would all line up. But I'm telling you, this was a fight. This was like wrestling an alligator.
Oh, good description. Yeah. And the interesting thing is, both you and I, my man, we were alive. We lived through this while these people mentioned were in the presidency, the apostleship, etc. We were kids growing up and up through our teenage years, etc. I'm not sure how you were taught, but I was taught that the brethren are always in conformity with each other. They know exactly what everyone's thinking because Jesus is basically meeting on a regular basis. Now, my dad exaggerated that, but he basically intimated every Thursday morning in the top of the temple, in the top rooms of the temple, he would meet with the apostles and the prophet, and he would guide his church that way. And then that gave him a few days to be able to get ready for Sunday and implement the information that Jesus was giving them. And that, of course, they were all in perfect harmony because they were all receiving it from Jesus. That is the type of literal fundamentalist that I was raised in. That's why this book, I'm in my 60s, Doug, and to show you the effect of this psychology, that was the most shocking part of the book for me, is recognizing these guys aren't in agreement. Now, I knew that already. Don't get me wrong. I knew that. But this book just avalanches it home with much, much more evidence than any other book I've ever read. How do you, isn't that the impression you got? This book is just astonishing.
Yeah, it's the density of the information is just incredible. And Dr. Harris, it took him 15 years to write this book. So he went through no telling how many archives of letters and files and things like that. I do understand from other interviews that he was in that the church was very cooperative, giving him access to much of the material, not all of it. But part of the reason he was able to put this together is because in the earlier days of the church, the apostles and the prophets could give their papers to basically whoever they wanted to. It wasn't mandatory that the church get them. And some of them did not leave them to the church. And that actually helped us be able to dig into some of the behind the scenes stuff here. Now, my understanding is that all general authorities have to sign an agreement that every personal paper that they create will be church property when they die. So their family gets nothing. And they're instructed not to keep journals. So,
they're
there you go.
Not to keep journals. Wow, what a change up.
That's what I understand. That's what I understand. So, yeah.
Well,
so, yeah, kind of interesting, huh?
Let me jump into just one quick specific idea. I've written, there's hundreds, literally. We may have to do this 5 or 6 times. I know John Dehlin has been interviewing this author, and he's been sharing some ideas. What amazed me, and I know you guys are welcome to call me Mr. Naive. You're welcome to call me Mr. Naive, but here's what astonished me right up front on the second page, which is in the introduction, which is page XI, third page. Sorry, I lied. Shut the program down. Okay, so here is the part. This gives you the overarching context for who did what through the rest of the book. So here is where I'm on page XI for those of you who have this book. The full story is told here for the first time. He says he explores contingent moments and provides an illuminating backstory to Kimble's revelation, and he does. Oh, it's amazing. In the 3 decades before he lifted the ban. So anyway, the idea of he wanted to keep it in light of the apostles' ambitious attempt to globalize the world. This is what caused the debates in the quorum. Their clashes were lively. They were fraught with emotion and bitterly contested. He is understating that. Believe it or not, I promise. That's understated. And they took place behind closed doors, leaving Latter-day Saints largely unaware of what was transpiring. On one side of the debate, here's the part I wanted to get to. On one side of the debate was the church liberals. Oh, a horrible word. But guess who they were? Listen to this. And why they are labeled as literal liberals. Hugh B. Brown as an apostle. Apostle Adam S. Benyon. General Authority Marion D. Hanks. Mormon intellectuals Lowry Nelson. The Sterling McMurrin and Lowell Benyon. These were considered the liberals. The conservatives who vehemently opposed these people, the ultra-conservatives, is what I call, he says in the book, the hardliners. These were the most important spokespersons include Apostle Joseph Fielding Smith, his son-in-law, Apostle Bruce R. McConkie, and Apostle Ezra Taft Benson, Mark E. Peterson, and Harold B. Lee. In between these two, we'll call them extremes for the sake of liberals versus conservatives. In between them, we have the moderates, which were David O. McKay, his counselor, J. Reuben Clark. And I'm not so sure that's, J. Reuben's kind of a wild card, isn't he? And then Apostle Spencer W. Kimble. The thing I want you to note is in this, I'm going to try not to exaggerate, Doug. If I overdo this, you're welcome to correct me sincerely. The liberals the conservatives in their dogmatic, narrow, biased, best, the McConkies, the Joseph Fielding Smiths, they hated the idea of blacks getting the priesthood. And they did everything, I promise it'll curl your hair. They did everything to prevent the Book of Mormon doctrine that all are alike unto God, whether black or white, Jew or Gentile, free or slave, it did not matter. They did not believe the doctrine of the Book of Mormon. Now, that's not the book's conclusion. That's my conclusion. They did not, they would not accept the idea that anyone of colored skin, and I don't care if it's black, brown, yellow, red, green, purple, it didn't matter. The whites were superior. No one was elevated to their class, to their spirituality. Am I exaggerating that, Doug?
No. And I do want to interject that I don't believe J. Reuben Clark was a moderate. He was a rabid anti-Semite, and I don't think
right?
I don't think you could consider him a moderate. But anyway, but the hardliners were obsessed with the idea of chosen lineage. They absolutely believed in sort of a royal lineage, through Abraham, et cetera, and they believed that white people were that lineage, not the brown and black people. And they fought tooth and nail to protect that idea. And it perpetuates. I mean, it's still, you can see it taught in the church today. You can go to a Sunday school class and somebody will start talking about this stuff. And, this book, it talks about how difficult it is to root out these beliefs, how this doctrine keeps clinging on. It's like it's got its own little life, and it just keeps perpetuating itself, even though the church has tried to expunge it. But as you'll see, trying to expunge it is a little trickier than you might think, because you've got 15 people that have to agree. The church, the way it's structured, it's a self-binding mechanism, because all it takes is just one guy saying no.
And that is how, interestingly enough, the apostles, the witnesses to Jesus Christ, prevented the revelation for decades.
Absolutely. The other thing that I think everybody should know is that this still goes on today. I heard Elder Bednar give a talk. It was to like young adults in England. It was like a fireside, and people could ask questions. And I forgot what the question was, but in his answer, he talked about how one of the new apostles, when they're in their quorum meeting, everything goes by seniority. So the oldest apostles have the most power and the most say, and the new guys are supposed to just sit there and learn. They're not supposed to say anything. And he said they had a new apostle in the quorum, and he kind of was looking a little bit startled as this quorum meeting went through some testy discussions, and he said L. Tom Perry handed him a note and said, "Pass this down to that guy." And he saw the note, and what it said was, "Welcome to the quorum. We play hardball here." So it's still going on today. They're still having these very heated debates about things. It's not this peaceful, blissful, little angels flittering in the corners. No.
And it's not just the brethren being human. This is a power play in the court. This book brought that out so astonishingly many times, of the grinding of power play. McConkie and Joseph Fielding Smith pushing back Spencer W. Kimble and Marion D. Hanks, and then them pushing back, and then Sterling McMurrin coming in and calling him out, and Joseph Fielding Smith saying, "Get his ass out of this church." And I can't remember which general authority said, hold on. A cooler head prevailed. And guess how he did it? He said, "This is going to be bad PR for the church."
I think that was Alvin R. Dyer that did that.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. It was. It sure was. Yes, Alvin Dyer. He was the cooler head, and he stopped Joseph Fielding Smith from making a complete monkey of himself. He's rolling over in his grave because he hated evolution too, right?
Exactly.
So, but yeah.
I did want to just, before we get too deep into some of the politics, I did want to talk just a little bit about the structure of this book.
Sure, so, absolutely.
Just so everybody kind of understands his approach. He divided this book up into time periods. So he starts out, the beginning of the church, and he goes, in slices of several decades. The biggest part of it, the beginning of the church, he's lumping most of the same century into one thing, but it makes it easy to kind of follow the progression of the thought that was going on with these people. And there was a progression of thought. There really was. The other thing to note is that, Joseph Smith ordained black people. He didn't seem to have any qualm about that. Joseph Smith, though, was not an abolitionist or, Yeah, I mean, he was a racist. Joseph Smith was also a racist. Joseph Smith believed that the black people should all, stay to themselves. He believed that black people should be freed and sent back to Africa, but he was not for the mixing of the races. And you'll see as we go through this that underlying all of the other curses and everything else was a literal terror of interracial marriage. They were scared shitless of interracial marriage. And that carried through the whole thing from Joseph Smith on. That was a big no-no. And held them back numbers of times when they were getting close to resolution on this stuff, the interracial marriage piece. So I just wanted to throw that out before we get too deep into all the other stuff. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and this is a commercial for Matt Harris. I hope you're listening, Matt. Matt also wrote an incredible book on Ezra Taft Benson and the making of the Mormon Rite. This also is an incredible read. It's a lot thinner than the Saints book, the Second Class Saints book, but he's an incredible writer. And then one more book that I want to plug is Greg Prince's David O. McKay and the Rise of Modern Mormonism. This book is also groundbreaking because he had access to the inner workings of the first presidency, all the notes that David O. McKay's secretary took. And it's a behind the scenes glimpse that you're not going to get anymore. Like I said, the church has locked down all of the private conversations that go on now. So the only thing that they'll ever release from here on out is sanitized stuff. So these types of books are just invaluable to get a feel for how things really worked back then.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's good. And also, now that you're plugging books, you can't outdo the Backyard Professor, my friend. I know.
My library is like this big compared to yours.
No, I didn't mean it that way. Greg Prince also did the letter Arrington, and that is such a vital insight into the nincompoopery of Joseph Fielding Smith and some of those. And I am being charitable when I say that. I promise. Yeah. And then if you haven't got it, The Reflections of a Historian by Arrington. This is by him himself. This book will appall you also because of the absolute cowardly way that the apostles and prophets treat their own historians, at least in the Camelot days. So anyway, back to reality. A question that one of your comments brought up. I distinctly remember Bruce R. McConkey's, I can't remember if it was a conference talk or if it was to the BYU or whatever, but I heard it. I didn't attend, so it might have been a conference on his concept of believing blood. You remember that one? Believing blood.
Believing blood. Well, that's right. It sounds right. The patriarchal stuff.
We in Israel have the believing blood, and the only choice people that we're going to have join the church are those who have the believing blood. All others are never going to make it in. I remember that, man. But that's the idea of the pure bloodline. He just put it in different words, but
so I guess really, we were going to start this conversation sort of closer to the modern era. And
sure.
Some of the background things, since we're talking about books, were actually books. Some of the things that contributed to the perpetuation of these false doctrines and the ban on the priesthood, or the racist ban, I should say, on the priesthood, were books. And Joseph Fielding Smith wrote 2 of them. You want to talk about that? Joseph Fielding Smith.
Say it again.
The 2 books that Joseph Fielding Smith wrote.
Oh, yeah. The Way to Perfection.
Yep.
And wasn't the other one on the evolution, or what one are you thinking? You wrote a lot of books.
Answers to Gospel Questions. Wasn't that it?
That was a series of books. It ended up being 5 volumes, and the Doctrines of Salvation also.
Yeah, Doctrines of Salvation. Yeah. So really, there were three. There were three things. Yeah, and one of them was multi-volume. But he was
his earliest one. His earliest one was The Way to Perfection. Now, my dad had that on his bookshelf. I honestly never read it, and when my dad passed away, they gave me the options of taking any of his books I wanted. And by that time, I was well out of Mormon apologetics. And what I did is I took the good stuff and turned the rest of it in for cash. So I had the chance to keep that book. Had I known what it contained, I saw Joseph Fielding Smith's name on it, and I already didn't like him. So I sold the book. It was kind of foolish on my part. But yeah, Joseph Fielding Smith, because of his Way of Perfection book, was considered the go-to man for scriptural issues.
Mm-hmm.
He was the head, quote, intellectual, which is a complete insult to the word. He's also the one that said God would never let man land on the moon. So much for being a prophet, stuff like that. So
yeah, I watched that live too. The moon land.
Yes,
so The Way to Perfection, Doctrines of Salvation, all of them perpetuated these theories that were, are no longer taught, or are not supposed to be taught, although they are sometimes, I guess. But the theory that Black African people were fence sitters in the preexistence. They basically sold their birthright in the preexistence because they were not valiant in standing up for the plan that Jesus introduced. And as a result, they were cursed to come down here with black skin and not have all the privileges and niceties that the white people did. And that was that doctrine that he perpetuated in that book. And I'm telling you, that book was on sale forever and a day for decades.
Yes,
both of those books, Doctrines of Salvation, and then Answers to Gospel Questions. There was some.
Isn't it still a Deseret book in paperback?
I don't know. It might be, but everything that he wrote about race was wrong. Everything that he wrote perpetuated these false notions about Black people and black skin. So they kind of fall into the picture as this, the glue that kind of glued down these doctrines and this thinking in the church, because the everyday member could go to that book and say, well, look right here, it says the Black people weren't valiant, in the preexistent.
And guess who began that view?
They didn't deserve the priesthood. What's that?
Guess who began that view? You remember? Page 12, B.H. Roberts.
B.H. Roberts. There you go.
Is that astonishing or what? Here we have this enlightened guy, the foremost intellectual of the church, and he's putting forth stupid stuff like that. That's just
we see stupid theories all the time in the church. I mean, think of the catalyst theory on the book of Abraham.
Smart people. Yeah.
It's because they can't come up with an answer. They can't come up with an answer. And so they just throw something out there, some theory that they think kind of fills the hole. But the members take it as like absolute God truth. God said this, this is the way it is. It came from the brethren. I can trust it. And by golly,
But that's what else this book showed me. I was one of those at one point.
Yeah,
but this book kind of, don't you think it unravels this idea of, well, God said it, so the brethren are right. And since whatever the brethren say realistically comes from God, because after all, they wouldn't be the brethren if it didn't, and therefore it's okay to just follow the brethren. This book shows that it never began with God said it, and it didn't exist and extend for the next 250 years in the church either. There is no God in this racist ideology. That's what shocked me about this book. And he doesn't come out and say it that way. This is the crude way the backyard professor says it. But I notice things like that because of the way I was raised. God literally, assuming she exists, did nothing about it. So obviously, from my point of view as an agnostic seeker, it must not have been that important or something. I don't know how to reconcile this, Doug. I'm kind of stuck, and it's all good, but there is no God involved in any of this, which is amazing.
They don't know how to reconcile it either, Carrie. That's the whole,
that's the point, right?
That's the whole point of this
book. They
should. Yeah. So, what you see is that they just struggle through this whole thing for decades and decades, and quorum member after quorum member coming and going, and they just can't seem to get above it.
This is the image I had in my mind about this whole thing, is they were butting heads nonstop. It was mind-boggling how unified they were with it. And the crazy thing is, the revelation only solved a small part of the problem for the church, because they never did away with any of those. It never even mentioned any of those doctrines about fence sitters, about being less valiant in the pre-existence, about intermixed marriages. It never did anything for any of that. So the problem, crazily enough, still exists. The flood, the overwhelming, at one point in this book, I think I've got it written about down somewhere, but I'll just tell it real quick.
Okay.
After the revelation occurred, of course, the blacks came flooding in, and it so scared the hell out of the leaders, the local leaders, the state presidents, the bishops, that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong if you remember this, one of them actually told the ward and the missionaries, whoa, slow the hell down. We don't want this to become an all-black church. We want this to be a white church. So let's just baptize a few of them. And I'm going, oh my God.
I actually think, I can't remember if a bishop did that, but I think Spencer W. Kimble actually did that in Brazil, because he was like, "Oh, we got to slow down. We got to slow down in Brazil."
We need this church to stay a white church.
One thing I wanted to mention is that came out of this racist stuff was the one drop rule. So somehow the idea that if you had one drop of blood in you that was Negro, that you were cursed, and your kids couldn't hold the priesthood, you couldn't hold the priesthood, that your wife couldn't go to the temple, etc. But this was really interesting. This is in chapter 2. In 1948, BYU student David Lloyd made a startling admission to church president George Albert Smith. Back then, you actually could talk to the church leaders. Now, of course, you can't. If you send a letter, they'll send it to your bishop and say, don't have them bother us anymore. He is worried that one of his children might unknowingly marry someone with Negro blood. He told Smith he had read a report that over 50,000 Negroes had crossed the color line every year. That means they married a white person. He feared the church growing in all sections of the nation. It would increase the likelihood of his son or daughter marrying someone with African ancestry. Lloyd had several questions for the president. One, who is a Negro? Is it just black Africans, or is it black people in the, Pacific and things like that? Number 2, does the church accept the South's definition that a Negro is a person who has from 164% to 100% Negro blood? Number 3, if yes to question 2, then is a person with 165th Negro blood a white individual? Are Negroes only only those persons who have been designated by revelation. Is there any explanation in the case of Elijah Abel? How does the church determine who and what a Negro is? And this absolutely freaked out George Albert Smith, because it's like, oh my gosh, how do we answer all this stuff? They didn't know. So that's when they kind of doubled down on this one drop rule. Okay. And they also sort of mobilized the genealogy department, the family history department. I think back then it was called the genealogy department, but they started screening people in areas that had a lot of blacks to look through their lineages and try to find out if they had Negro blood. And I actually have some personal experience with this. A friend of mine, he actually was my scoutmaster. He was dating a woman and did some sort of research and found out that she had, like, her great grandmother or something was black or part black or something like that. And he was engaged to her, and he called off the engagement because she had that one drop of Negro blood. So this was a very scandalous and difficult thing, for individual people who lived in areas where there were a lot of black people. And the church kind of freaked out as what to do on this. And they started imposing some really heavy rules and restrictions in, like, Brazil and some of the other, Haiti, the Caribbean, other places where there were a lot of mixed race people. And they had, before they could baptize anybody, they had to do all this genealogical research.
So it wore them out, didn't it?
It wore them out. It was so disheartening and so difficult. And for the members, especially, some of them got baptized, and then someone would come back and say, well, I found out that you have 1/600th of a part of the Negro blood in your lineage. And they had already been ordained and things like that. They'd already been, so people lost their blessings.
We're telling these people, you've got 1/600 billionth, 450 millionth drop of the curse.
Oh yeah.
They called them the curse, the cursed blood. I mean, how would that psychologically make you feel? It's just, I am impressed with the strength of the black people that went through this, who still joined the church anyway. I couldn't have done that. I wouldn't have done that. I don't know what it was. I can't quite grasp the impetus. It's okay. You can call me an apostate and an idiot that the Spirit has left because I criticize the brethren or for whatever reason. But these people are stellar people to be able to put up with such nonsensical ideas and doctrines. It's really very impressive compared to the utter quizzling, weak-minded, prejudiced, racist white leaders. And I promise I'm trying to give them as much charity as I know how to tonight. I promised my wife I would not explode on screen with how appalled I am at it. I still may have to break that promise when we get to certain parts. We'll see. But really, truly, this story is a heartache. And in some respects, it's a triumph. I can't, after reading this book, now understand, I probably have some of that leftover racism in me, because this is what I was raised in. This was the approach and attitude I had. But I can't help but look at black people now with an entire new respect. That's really kind of surprising me.
Yeah, well, they if they were in the church, they went through hell.
Oh man,
I really did. Yeah. This was just the start. The way they were treated, we haven't discussed that. But anyway, one thing to note is that your old friend Hugh Nibley, he was one of the ones that was against the whole ban. Nibley said, let's give them credit where credit's due. Nibley said there's no such thing as a pure white race. There's no such thing.
There's no way. Not a chance.
Here, Nibley was one of the top intellectuals in the church, and he was completely ignored by the brethren when he made that statement.
They loved it when I started talking about the Book of Mormon, though.
Yeah. So eventually, all of this hubbub over the one drop rule and doing the genealogy for people in these areas and denying the priesthood or taking the priesthood away from them after they've already gotten it because somebody found out something in their family line. It caused so much heartache and was such an onerous thing that eventually David O. McKay he had it with it. There was so much negativity coming to him that he said, I'm done with this. And he actually got on a plane and went to South Africa to do his own investigation of what was going on. And he came back to Salt Lake to the brethren, and he announced that they were no longer going to do the genealogy thing on South African people. He said, it's ridiculous. He said, if they look white, they're white, and quit digging into their past to try to figure it out. He just put a stop to it. Now he only did that in South Africa, unfortunately, but when he did that, I mean, he literally just broke Quorum of the 15 protocol, so to speak, and just basically hammered down and said, I did this, and this is now the policy going forward. And there was no discussion in the quorum and debate and everything. He just declared it. So that one little act, even though he never got the ban lifted during his lifetime, but that was that was a little crack in that wall. That was the first little crack. Okay. So now we're not going to worry about doing genealogy in South Africa, at least. They still did it in other places, especially Brazil and the Caribbean, but South Africa, they left them alone. So that was a milestone event right there. The other thing that then cropped up just after this was segregation. Now, most of the people in the audience probably don't remember segregation, but I certainly do. My family lived in Nashville when the segregation was going on. Okay. When the civil rights stuff started and they declared that you couldn't do segregation anymore, they introduced what they called busing for the children. So the idea was, okay, they've segregated, they put all the black kids over in these schools and all the white kids over in these schools, and we're going to bus black kids over to white schools and white kids over to black schools, and we're going to mix it up so that there's a more even distribution of the races. Well, when my parents, like a lot of people, they were like, my kid's not going to go through that. It was going to be like an hour bus ride each way to get to this black school where we were. So my parents literally got up and moved to a county north of Nashville so that and they didn't have busing there because they didn't have any black people hardly in that county. So they just moved. But anyway, that whole thing was sort of a dark cloud that came over the United States. The fight for civil rights, trying to end segregation and end the Jim Crow laws and things like that had developed that marginalized black people. I mean, you couldn't go to the same if you were a black person, you couldn't go to the same bathroom as a white person. You had to go to the back of the bus if you were riding on a bus. You had to have a separate water fountain from white people. You couldn't drink the same water that white people drank. It was ridiculously extreme. And there, the black community eventually rose up against this, and they had sit-ins. One of a real famous one happened in Nashville where they went to a drugstore, and drugstores back then used to have, a soda fountain counter. It was like a bar with bar stools, and they would make sandwiches and soda pop and ice cream and things like that. And the black people, very reverently, they were dressed in their Sunday best clothes. They came in and they sat at that counter and asked to be served, and they were refused. And then the police eventually were called in and they arrested them. And they kind of these protests like that started happening all over the country as the civil rights movement started. So
Yeah.
you have
what's so interesting too, to bring this into the book. I lived in a place where we did not have a lot of blacks, so that never was really an issue that I experienced firsthand until my mission. Interestingly enough, in 1979 to 1981, and I went to Missouri, right back to church history. It's crazy that the church was so against the civil rights. They thought Martin Luther was Satan incarnate, and because the underlying theme, if I remember right, correct me if I'm wrong here, Doug, wasn't it Ezra Taft Benson who used Martin Luther as a basis of saying the communists are using him to overtake us? They're using the civil rights movement as a way to infiltrate our government.
Yeah, well, the first one that came unhinged was Marky Peterson. Marky Peterson was an arch racist, and he gave a talk where he just literally came unhinged in his talk, talking about the evils of interracial marriage and civil rights and all this other stuff, and it caused a furor. The newspapers all across the country were talking about it, that kind of a thing. So he was one of them. And then Ezra Taft Benson, who got involved in the John Birch Society, was another one that was, just really damaged the church by his rhetoric, calling Martin Luther King a communist, saying, like you said, he said that the whole civil rights movement was a communist plot to destroy America, to destroy the white race. Okay.
And that was his concern, the white race, because Martin Luther became so famous so fast. Right? I say Martin Luther. I didn't mean Martin Luther. Yeah,
Martin Luther King, MLK.
Yeah, MLK. This very interesting. All he was asking for. Okay, so. Civil rights, people rights. Would I be going too far if I propose perhaps, and I don't have evidence for this, but based on what I read in this book, I've got to be somewhat closer than not close enough to think the brethren couldn't even hardly fathom blacks being human. Perhaps I'm overstating it, but they treated them. This is a nice title. Yeah. They treated them like they were subhumans. I mean, it was horrible how they treated them verbally. Physically, not so much that the book brought out as opposed to the policies that kept them second class or subhuman, and instilled. This is what's so crazy about this. To me, it seemed to instill fear in the white population against the blacks for nothing else than their color.
Yep.
And they attributed every negative thing to them with absolutely, fence sitters in the pre-existence, less valiant. And the crazy thing is, the Mormons didn't even know what it was after the blacks got the priesthood, and that doctrine was still being taught in the church by members. The blacks started asking the apostles in letters. They said, okay, it was Darius Gray, I do believe, Darius Gray, who asked the question of one of the apostles. He asked, okay, but what was the offense in the pre-existence? that made us less. What didn't we do? What was the sin? And the white guy said, well, we don't know. And so the blacks were saying, so you don't know what the problem is, and you're saying the problem is for us, but we're not allowed to repent of that? God wouldn't allow us that option? And the brethren had just turned the conversation off. They didn't even want that conversation after the revelation because it didn't deal with any of those ridiculous earlier doctrines. Just give the blacks the priesthood and let them all come through the gates. That was the approach to that revelation.
Interesting. So during this time, and I'm living in the South, there were riots, there were upheavals. People became afraid of their, like to give you an example, my grandparents had a black cook, a black maid, a black laundry lady, and a black yard keeper. Okay. People kind of became concerned that these people were going to turn on them. It was kind of, but that, blacks were just considered that they were the servants. The white people hired them, but they were all the servants. But it was kind of a scary time. And as a kid, it was very confusing, because I loved some of these servants that my grandmother had. I didn't understand at that point in time. I didn't understand the difference, what was going on, especially the laundry lady. I was really close to her, and I go down, and she had an ironing machine. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those, but it, rather than a little iron, it's a whole machine. You just put whatever it is, and you go, and there's a pedal on the floor. You push, and steam comes out. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. But yeah, they were treated. They were treated poorly, treated as second-class humans. And the church didn't treat them any better than the other people did. So there was nothing special about the way the church treated black people. In addition to the ban. Okay, so segregation happened. Everybody became unhinged. Interracial marriage was like the bugaboo, scary thing.
That was the terrifying thing for the brethren.
They couldn't get over this. Oh my gosh, somebody's going to marry a black person. So anyway. Then Sterling McMurrin, the thing that blew the minds of the general authorities is that Sterling McMurrin actually spoke at an NAACP meeting. And it was like a conference.
Excoriated the brethren there. Yeah. He told the NAACP, hey, guess what? My church is a bunch of flipping idiots. Their doctrines are ridiculous. That really them off.
He completely PO'd them. That's when they wanted to excommunicate him. But Sterling was very much a Jack Mormon at that point in time. He wasn't really a believer, but had great influence in the church and had lots of friends in very high places, including David O. McKay. He was very close to David.
Getting ready to say that David O. McKay saved his bacon. If you want to hear something sad, Doug, can I interpose here? Just
go ahead.
I had heard way early in my life that I had friends. It was when I was going to Rick's College, back when it was called Rick's College. I'm dating myself. And I had a bunch of friends that we sat at a table together and ate lunch with, a thing Mormons always do. Well, one of them gave me an article by Sterling McMurrin. And I asked him, I said, so who's this? I'd never heard of it. And he heard of it. And he said, well, he's the one, for lack of time, he's very liberal, but he's very enlightening. I said, well, how does he stand in? I had just discovered farms in Hugh Nibley. I discovered Nibley on my mission, but I just discovered farms. And I asked, well, how does he stand in relation to what Hugh Nibley does? He goes, oh, him and Hugh Nibley don't get along, I don't think. Hugh Nibley is too conservative, and Sterling McMurrin is much more philosophically adept. And this is so sad. I have a bad confession, and this is being videoed, so the world's going to know now what a real dingling ignoramus I am. That is the only impression of Sterling McMurrin I have had up until this book. I didn't even know what he had done to cause the brethren. Oh, I knew about the Swearing Elders Club that he was.
Swearing elders. Yeah.
The Swearing Elders. I had heard about them. Lowell Benyon. I didn't know a thing about Lowell Benyon either, other than he was a favorite of the students, but he was too liberal for the brethren. Well, if he's for the brethren, then I'm not interested in him. And I never knew what it was that caused the tension. And now that I know, this is one of the things I would correct if I could go back to Rick's College. I'd read everything those guys ever wrote, and I am going to. So anyway, that's my interruption. But yeah,
no, you're good. You're good.
Sterling McMurrin is gold because he was on the side of charity for people, all people. And if that's a liberal, then God damn it, call me a liberal, and I'll wear the name with pride. I don't give a damn what the conservatives say about the Holy Ghost doesn't support liberals. I've got Jesus Christ on my side. He's the most liberal of the liberals. You want proof? Read the Book of Mormon. All are alike unto God. It doesn't say Jew and Gentile, male and female, white and, well, only white. Go back and reread that and see what it says. Jesus is all inclusive, which this book shows is the so-called, quote, liberal agenda. The labels, liberal, conservative, Mormon, anti-Mormon, Republican, Democrat, all of those are just labels. It's bullshit. It doesn't give you the full context. If you want to defeat someone, all you have to do these days in our dumbing down is stick a dumb label on them and then attack the label. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. It is crazy.
Sorry, I'm getting on a rant. Sorry.
All right.
Okay,
all
keep going.
Let's keep going. So McMurrin gave his talk. The other thing that started happening was as the civil rights movement progressed and as the civil rights movement won, okay, and there were laws created that said, hey, guess what? We agree and you can't discriminate anymore. The church started to find itself on the short end of the stick, especially when it came to BYU and athletics. Exactly. So there were a number of scandals where BYU athletics were either censored or the other teams said we're not going to play them because they're racist. The church was labeled as a racist organization, and not only did it affect the sports teams, but the government started to come after the church and say, guess what? We have rules now that you should be giving equal rights in employment to these people, and you don't have
your college.
No black people. Not only they only had no black. There were no black professors anywhere in the church educational system, and they only had a handful of black students at church colleges. So the government started coming down on them for that. Okay, they had that pressure, and outside pressure coming at them from
and they had the clout. Yeah, as opposed to the outside pressure from the religious end, from the Brazilians and the blacks, they had the power to cease their accreditation and stop federal funding.
Yeah.
And Joseph Fielding Smith was such a broad-minded, inspired prophet that he agreed. He said, oh, we don't need the federal government money. Forget it. We're going to stay racist. And the other brethren said, I think this is where Alvin R. Dyer came in too. And he said, Joseph, sit down, think this through, dude. Don't take the funding away. That's a huge error. Calm down, cowboy. Joseph Fielding Smith would have sent us back to the caveman days if he'd have lived just another 10 years as prophet. It's astonishing how short-sighted this inspired man was.
Yeah. So anyway, the church was being just inundated from all different sides with controversy, with legal challenges, with accusations of racism, and they were pretty much, they were on the money. These people that were accusing them, because it was racist policy. So to add to the heap of this. To add to the heap,
do it.
Enter from stage right a young general authority in the 70s named Bruce R. McConkie. Bruce R. McConkie. So Bruce R. McConkie was the son-in-law of Joseph Fielding Smith. Okay, and he had inherited Joseph Fielding Smith's philosophies about race. And actually took them even further in some cases. So Joseph Fielding Smith comes in. This just shows you how inbred the quorum of the 15 is, So he's not an apostle yet. Okay, we all know he becomes one, but Bruce R. McConkie comes in. He's a 70, and he's the grandson, or not. I'm sorry, the son-in-law of Joseph Fielding Smith. Well, Bruce R. McConkie is a scriptorian. He's a scholar, and he has some interesting ideas. But he writes a book called Mormon Doctrine. And this is going to be the book that shook the world, because Mormon Doctrine was all of a sudden in a church where doctrine is kind of like Jell-O. It's so difficult to nail it down, And for the first time, somebody went through all the doctrines of the church and said, okay, here's what this means. Here's what that means. This is where we go with this. Yeah. He lined everything up. It was like an encyclopedia. You could, go to the A's, to the B's, to the C's, to the D's. You could look things up in the index. What about polygamy? What about baptism? And it became an instant hit with church members all over the world, and sold like hotcakes. Okay. The problem with this, and this is that behind the scenes drama that you never hear about. The problem with this is that Bruce R. McConkie did not run this book past anybody in church leadership before it was published. He just had it published without permission from anybody, without having any kind of review done. And the brethren were just absolutely livid with him. He came very close to being excommunicated. It got so bad.
No, really?
Yes. It was very.
Well, I know McKay had a committee of people, didn't he? And
oh my gosh! Well, then, yeah. So David O. McKay, once he had calmed down a little bit, he said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do." He said, "We're going to have." Let's see, who was it? I know it was Harold B. Lee and somebody else, but he had two or three apostles. Yeah, he had 2 or 3 apostles that he assigned to go through that book and find every error in that book. And he told Bruce R. McConkie, you're going to put out a second edition of this book, and you're going to correct all of these things. The unfortunate thing is that all of the false doctrine on race was left in the book. None of that was taken out. None of Harold B. Lee was a racist. He was very racist. They skipped over that part and they left it in it. But yeah, there was over 800, I think, corrections in that book that were made between the first and the second editions. Anyway, but that racial doctrine then became available to every Tom, Dick, and Harry member of the church.
And it was Mormon Doctrine.
Mormon Doctrine, written by, he was rapidly, he had advanced to the apostleship. Okay. So they could look at that book and say, hey, an apostle wrote this book. This is Mormon Doctrine. It came from the church. I bought it at Deseret Book. And this is the real deal. This is church doctrine. And what they were reading was that Negroes were fence sitters, that they were less valiant, that they were cursed, their
That
lineage
they
was
would be
cursed.
servants in eternity in
Yeah.
the celestial world if they got there.
If they got there. So now you have this just, all over the church in every Tom, Dick, and Harry's hands. And, how do you combat that once it's gotten out of the bag? How do you undo that? And this is a failing. This is something that came out in this book, and I've seen it in a couple of these other books that I showed you earlier, but it really hit home when I read this book, is that the brethren protect each other above everything else. This thing that happened with Bruce R. McConkie, the general membership didn't hear a word about it.
No,
Not a word. Okay.
Not a word.
The brethren will not correct or do anything to harm the reputation of another member of the quorum. It's like the Fight Club, they have this little secret agreement in the quorum that they'll have each other's backs. And so when these controversies come in and people do things that they shouldn't really do, they are protected. The first rule of the patriarchy is to protect the patriarchy. That's the first rule.
Do you realize, and here's another real bad confession to show my vast fund of ignorance here, no joke, I did not know about the controversy with behind the scenes with Mormon doctrine until after I was a Mormon apologist.
Well, they covered it up, and
I was quoting Mormon doctrine, and it was probably Kevin Graham. That is one sharp cotton picking cookie. He is so good. But Kevin Graham said, "Shirts, what are you doing quoting McConkie? What's wrong with quoting McConkie? He was an apostle." And he goes, "No, dude, hold on, whoa." And in fact, I do believe it was after I was a Mormon apologist that I first learned about the controversy with Bruce R. McConkie in Eugene, England, which this book also
that was terrible. Yeah, was terrible.
That's how reading this book taught me that I was raised in a bubble. And I was offended a few times when I had other people, both Mormons and non-Mormons, say to me, "Shirts, you were raised in a bubble. You are so naive, man. Come on. Read some background." And I go, "Are you kidding me? I read like crazy." Well, a lot of it was my dad's books. But this book really brought out the fact, and I'm not complaining, I had a magnificent raising. My parents did me good. I thank God for my mother and father. I had a phenomenal childhood, no complaints, but it was in a bubble.
Yep. Well, speaking of bubbles, we're going to float on over to the next one. So if Mormon doctrine wasn't enough of an issue, we also had Ezra Taft Benson. Ezra Taft Benson.
Of course.
That became completely unleashed during the time period and was wreaking havoc on the world. So, he was very indoctrinated with the Birch Society. He was trying to get the brethren to endorse the Birch Society. He reinforced the racist doctrines, accused the leaders like Martin Luther King of being communists. He was all into conspiracy theories and everything. And the brethren, at one point, they just had to do something to get rid of him. So they sent him to be over the European mission. Okay. So he just kind of whoosh out of the United States. He had been censored by the quorum. Actually had to apologize for some of the remarks he made in General Conference because he just unleashed on the racist stuff and accused, right as the church was trying to develop a relationship with the NAACP. Yeah. And then along comes Benson and just blows it out of the water with this talk in General Conference. So he had
He undid 20 years of work the brethren
it,
were
yeah.
trying to do. He undid it in one speech.
Spencer W. Kimble was so pissed that he made Ezra Taft Benson apologize to the Quorum of the 12, or the Quorum of the 15. And he wasn't satisfied with the job that he did when he apologized to the Quorum of the 15. So then he made him turn around and apologize to the entire body of general authorities when they came in for general conference.
And remember, this is meek, mild, small, weak Spencer W. Kimble / Yoda.
Yeah,
who made Ezra Taft Benson do that? He didn't take any
Yoda, there it is. My Yoda lamp. Yeah, a lot of people said.
Oh, look at that Yoda lamp. Hey, bring that up. Can you move that closer to the camera? Look at that. You've got a Yoda lamp. How dare you? Dude, that is rocking. Look at that. Oh, you're inspiring me now. Look at that.
A friend of mine gave me that one. But yeah, so anyway, Ezra Taft Benson was sort of another loose cannon that was just absolutely not helping things. Let's see. So we talked about the black faculty at BYU. The government was coming down on them about not having black faculty, and the church started doing some sort of little weak attempts to hire black faculty on that. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Wilkinson, this little Napoleon is what he was called. He kept asking the brethren, he kept asking the apostles and the first president. He said, okay, look, I'm the president of the college, right? But not only is the NAACP, but the federal government is coming down on me, and I don't know what to do here. I've never been in this position. Do I hire a black faculty? And Joseph Fielding Smith, I do believe, it was either him or Bruce R. McCarthy, one of the major, quote, conservatives, said, you hire one black faculty, your ass is grass. You're out of here. Don't you even think about it. Ignore them. Maybe it was Joseph Fielding Smith, but they told him, ignore them. And he did for 3 months. They gave him 1 year to comply. You remember that? And they contacted him 3 months into it and said, how's it going? He goes, oh, yeah, I'm working on it. Then he go to the brethren. He said, what do I do? And they said, oh, you'll figure it out. They offered him no help.
No.
And then when they made choices, they got after him.
Yeah, poor Wilkinson was pinched between the brethren and the United States government, and it was kind of brutal. He did not win many battles there. It was pretty brutal for him. So Ezra Taft Benson, we kind of went through his thing, and then the black faculty. Benson eventually did become president of the church. And surprisingly, when he did, he absolutely set aside all this other stuff.
He did.
Flew straight as an arrow. He was. He didn't have long before he became, incapacitated with Alzheimer's or whatever it was that he had. The church tried to hide that. They would prop the poor guy up, for a picture in front of a temple and that kind of thing. And his grandson said he didn't even know where he was.
That was Steve, right?
Yeah, Steve. So
good cartoonist.
Benson's tenure, was relatively short as far as him being coherent. It dragged on for years, though, with the church. And basically, Hinckley and Monson ran the church during that time.
Yeah, Hinckley was the ace in the hole. He ran the church. I mean, the man was put in the apostleship at age 35. That's pretty impressive. But I mean, he was in there for like 65 years running the show. So yeah.
So anyway, Ezra Taft Benson, his tenure comes to an end, and then you have Harold B. Lee come in. And Harold B. Lee was only in there for less than a year.
Yeah.
Everybody thought he was young. Everybody thought he was going to be prophet for a long time, kind of like David O. McKay. But he, boom, had a heart attack or something, and he was gone. And
Yeah.
then it was Kimble, and everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, Kimble!" He was this little guy. He had a lot of health issues.
Had throat cancer.
Cancer. He couldn't hardly talk right. People were really worried about that. But he actually was one of the most amazing church presidents that we've ever had, really. Now,
Yeah.
not everything he did was good. Okay. Miracle of forgiveness. No. Bad stuff. But his work on the race problem was just amazing. And when he became president of the church, he had all the general authorities come together, and he gave this talk that absolutely electrified the general authorities. He got up and he talked about how the church was going to lengthen its stride. We were going to, our mission was to go to the entire earth. Every person needed to hear it. Every young man should serve a mission. He just started laying down his vision for the future and how the church was going to go from sort of the meager little church that it was to something that could fill the whole earth, basically. And this vision just blew their minds. Okay. So right away, he got a lot of people kind of on his side.
And also, Doug, I think this was at the time also when maybe it was a little later, but the other thing Kimble did that I've never heard a prophet doing since is he stood up in general conference and he said, I have a lot to repent for and repent of, and I'm going to get rid of my burdens, and I would encourage you to do the same. I don't know if I have ever heard any other Mormon prophet say that, but Spencer Kimble had the panache, the foresight, and I'm going to say it. Yeah, you heard it here at the BYP Live. The inspiration to be the leader that we need now, not we, I don't care anymore, but that the church needs now and doesn't have. Because that was talked about for years because it so blew everyone's mind. The prophet has need to repent. Well, then I better. Maybe that was when he kicked out the miracle of forgiveness and everybody tried to ask him, what in the hell is this shit? I don't know, but there was a lot of people who loved that book. I personally did not. My bishop told me I needed to read it, and I refused. I wouldn't do it. I've never read it all the way through.
Debbie in the chat was saying, I heard before Kimble took over, the church was going bankrupt. He saved the church from bankruptcy. Actually, that happened before Kimble got there, but his counselor in Eldon Tanner is the one that saved the church from bankruptcy. So
that is
David O. McKay.
They brought him down from Canada.
From Canada. He was an oil person, oil baron, and very business savvy. And he came in and changed the whole financial structure of the church and saved the church. So
what happened was it was Marion D. Hanks who insisted that they make a church office building and make it big and make it glorious and make it the tallest building in Salt Lake, because that will show the magnificence of the church. And they all just melted before him when he described it. They go, oh my gosh, why didn't we think of that? And so they did. And it just damn near bankrupted them because they put so much money into not just that building, but Marion D. Hanks, from my understanding, was the big spender. And
No,
it
wasn't him. It was another guy. It was not another guy.
I thought it was Marion D. Hanks. All right.
No, he was a counselor. He was a counselor, but it wasn't Marion D. Hanks. Okay. Marion D. Hanks was the guy who was the most anti-racist of all the general authorities. He was the most anti-racist. But no, that was another guy. I forgot his name.
Okay.
Moyle. Yeah.
Henry D. Moyle. Thank you.
Yeah.
It was Henry D. Moyle. I agree.
He was a disaster. He was a disaster.
Yeah, Henry D. Moyle. That was the man. Thank you, Tim. Very good. Very good. Yep. Yeah, that name rings. Okay.
So Kimble gave his electrifying address, and then after that, we have a very important development that occurred. That if you haven't read this before, you really should go read it. A guy named Lester Bush, he wrote an article for Dialogue about race, the race issue, and this became almost like I don't know what you call it, kind of like a scripture almost for the general authorities. Spencer W. Kimball's copy of this, his son Edward found the copy of this after he passed away, and it was almost completely marked with underlining in red, things written in the margin. It was just absolutely poured over by his dad. But the miracle of Lester Bush's contribution is that he was able to go to the BYU library and get one of the, let's say, the more adventurous librarians there to give him access.
Was that our Tim Rathbone? Fess up, Tim. Was that you?
He might know the person.
Tim will know the person because, keep going. I'll let you tell it.
He let him get access to the minutes of the quorum of the 15 meetings. Okay, all of them, all the way back. And because he was able to access that information, he could go back and trace the evolution of these theories and excuses and reasons that the brethren thought the racial ban was from God. And basically he showed that it wasn't from God. Right. It was from Brigham Young. He showed proof positive.
That was the big
started at Brigham Young,
and that diametrically was opposite of what Joseph Fielding Smith was saying and wanted it known. He wanted it to be from Joseph Smith, and Lester Bush said there is no evidence for this, and that's why Lester Bush got in bad with some of the brethren, because they said, wait a minute, we know there was a revelation from Joseph Smith, and Lester Bush said, no, there is not.
Yeah.
So see, historical evidence, you guys, matters. That's why we make such a big deal about this.
It really matters.
So Boyd K. Packer, roll over in your grave. We're not following your stupid method anymore. We are going to the historians. I just had to put it in.
Yeah. So Lester Bush, this whole thing, the brethren, and in fact, Boyd K. Packer tried to talk him out of publishing this. He got an advanced copy of it. And it took about 2 years for this thing to get published because it kept going back and forth, and general authorities calling in Bush, trying to get him to change his mind. They talked to the editor of Dialogue and tried to threaten him, told him he'd be excommunicated if he printed it. And he said, well, jump in the lake. So it did get printed.
Wasn't it at that time? Wasn't that Eugene England?
I don't know who it was, but they did threaten him. They threatened him with excommunication. So anyway, that was kind of a turning point. Also, was this document that appeared in Dialogue from Lester Bush. So new things were coming out that threw doubt on the ban and the reason for the ban. So anyway, next we're going to jump to
and that brought boatloads and boatloads and boatloads, and I'm not kidding, of letters and phone calls into the church office building, and the brethren were between a rock and a hard place, and they didn't know how to proceed. That was one of the main pressures, is they realized our people are not going to shut up about this. And now the book describes they had almost all-nighters a lot, and they got nothing done. They solved nothing. They got together, prayed, fasted, tried like crazy to work through the issues, and they couldn't figure it out no matter what. I mean, so much for asking Jesus and he'll tell you the answer. That's how Joseph Smith used to do it. I'm just saying. I know I always fall back to that, but that is how Joseph Smith was said to have done it. But these guys can't seem to do that. I would be interested to learn where the idea came from that a revelation from a prophet has to have the full agreement of the quorum of the 12 and first presidency, because that is what kept Mormonism racist for over a century and a half.
Yeah.
That's
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that.
I don't need, maybe we'll research it and do another show. So anyway.
I want to read a little bit out of here because
absolutely, please.
So, you know, Lee dies, Kimble takes over, he electrifies the brethren. All of a sudden, the whole church is energized. And I remember this happening because I was close to missionary age. You know, I was in like a junior in high school or something when he took over. And it was like, oh my gosh, you know, I need to serve a mission. So everybody in my ward, kids started getting ready. We started dressing like missionaries. You know, that's where all this white shirt and tie stuff. Before that, I would wear colored shirts and
I remember
stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it didn't matter. It didn't matter what you wore. You just passed the sacrament and whatever you wore. Okay.
Yeah.
And then people started wearing the white shirts and the ties and everything. So anyway, I wanted to read a little clip from Kimble's journal. He says, I believe most revelations would come when a man is on his tiptoes, reaching as high as he can for something which he knows he needs. And then there are bursts upon him that provide the answer to his problems. Okay. So Kimble was his theory was you go crazy trying the hardest you can. And then at the end, you'll get the revelation will come. That's kind of what he was thinking. So Harris says that Kimble just one day decided, I'm going to lift the ban.
Let's do it.
I'm going to lift the ban. He just decided he was going to do it. Yep. And he knew that he would need a revelation for it, and he knew he had lots of hurdles to overcome, but he just started from that time forward, lining up all of the ducks that he was going to have to knock down, you know, in order to make this thing work. But he just made a decision that he was going to get rid of the ban. So let's see. Let's see, 23, religious experience. Let's see, hang on just a second.
You're going to teach us some apostate doctrine, please. What page?
Yeah, it's all, hang on, I've got to find it first. 23, where's 23? 89, 21, 20, 23, here it is. 23. Oh, yeah, okay. All right, so there was a lot of things that Kimble had to overcome, and we're not going to get into all of it because it would take us all night to go through it all.
We've got all night. Oh,
he had apostles that were against him. He had the membership to worry about. He had a temple in Brazil they were building. They had actually started building it, and they didn't know how it was going to work because most of those people down there were biracial.
They were still on that one drop of blood issue.
Yeah. All these things were in motion. So Kimble started in the meetings with the Quorum of the 15. He started bringing this up and basically whittling down the ones that had arguments against it. When that started not being effective, he actually started meeting one-on-one with these guys, grilling them about their reluctance on this issue. And through his perseverance, he was just like a bulldog. Through his perseverance, he actually got people onto his side. One of the most surprising things is one of the early ones to come over to his side was Bruce R. McConkie. Bruce R. McConkie came over to his side and said, hey, you know,
I have a confession to make.
Yeah, go ahead.
that was where the part of the book that I actually cried. I was too madam livid to cry for the blacks because McConkie was the conservative pillar. And just like what's his nose McCoy said, you can dig under the Book of Mormon, you got to go over the Book of Mormon, through the Book of Mormon, etc. You can't just dismiss. Yeah, what's his name?
Holland.
Yeah, Holland. Boy,
Yeah.
talk about a brain fart. McConkie was that pillar that said, Spencer, looking down on him from his 6'9" frame to the 5'2" Yoda. McConkie was saying, Spencer, don't go there. And then overnight, he changed. And what he did, sorry, I'm not going to steal your thunder. He invented a new doctrine to justify his faith, to convince the other apostles, and he backed it up with scripture, man.
Yeah, all of a sudden, it's like he comes out of the corner with all this new thought, all this new doctrine,
the adoption,
ways to look at the scriptures. So that was like this huge relief to Spencer W. Kimble. His counselors also were in on it with him.
Yes.
He had some moderates that started to come over with him, but he still has some holdouts: Marky Peterson, Delbert Stapley, and Ezra Taft Benson, the three most hardline racists in the quorum. So how did he solve that problem? Well, one of them was he sent Marky Peterson, who probably, in my opinion, he was an arch racist. Marky Peterson.
He was a what?
An arch racist. Arch. He was dyed-in-the-wool racist, not gonna budge.
No.
He sent Marky Peterson down to South America on an assignment. Okay, so kind of got him out of the way. Delbert Stapley was in the hospital and would later die. He was,
just 2 months later.
2 months, 2 months away from dying. So Stapley was on the way out. He was in the hospital. So Spencer W. Kimble kind of took this opportunity. The only one left was Ezra Taft Benson. So, Spencer W. Kimble, like I said, he met with each one, but he gets up in his meeting, in the quorum meeting, and says, okay, I have a revelation, and this is what we need to do. And are you going to support me or not? And all the brethren that were there said it was like a super spiritual experience. And I don't doubt it, because this is like a sea change, that's going to rock the entire church. And they all had to feel good about it. And they did. They all felt good about it. Even Ezra Taft Benson, caved to it. They got on the phone with Marky Peterson and told him that everybody had voted yes. What are you going to vote? And that was kind of like a cliffhanger. And he said, well, if everybody else is going for it, I'll go for it too. And then Delbert Stapley was in no condition to really argue. Who just said, yep, go for it. He said, yep. So boom, all of a sudden this magical thing happened. And the brethren were all, quote unquote, unified. And that was it. That the revelation had been received, and they were going to go forward with it. So then they had to go and convince all the other general authorities. So they called them in, had a solemn assembly in the temple, and President Kimble got up and presented it all to them. This is when Marion Hanks, who had fought all the racial stuff for so long, he was in the 70s. And he was just so overcome with emotion that he could hardly speak. But he got up and gave a speech that, was very moving. And all the brethren said that they felt the Spirit and that they felt like this was the will of the Lord. So boom, it's just done. And Spencer Kimble turns to N. Eldon Tanner, who was his counselor, and says, go tell the world. Go tell the world. Go tell the world. So he goes down, and that it goes out.
Do you remember where you were, Doug, when you heard that announcement? I do.
I do.
This is like 9/11. I mean,
Like 9/11.
this was a big deal, man.
Yeah,
Where were you?
I was on my mission in Idaho. I was in Weiser, Idaho. Okay.
Oh,
I was on Brother Panicky's farm. He was a one of the stake missionaries, and or no, he was a ward mission leader. And we were in one of his barns. He had been working on a tractor or something, and we were talking to him about something, and he had a radio going in the barn. And all of a sudden, a special bulletin came over and said the church is going to allow blacks to hold the priesthood. And we were like, what just happened?
You were on your mission, huh?
I was on my mission. Yeah. So not that there's a lot of black people in Idaho to teach, let me tell you.
I can testify to that.
Yeah, you can testify to that. But we
do have a black congregation now, though, and they're great people.
Yeah,
That's good. Yeah. There's about 45. So
yeah, so the first thing that we were asking was, well, is that the full priesthood, everything, or is that like just the Aaronic priesthood? There was nothing. He just said they're going to get the priesthood, and we're just like, oh, okay. I mean, we were happy, but it was like there wasn't any clarification. We had to wait for our mission president to clarify that.
I was in my mom's driveway. I had just pulled up. I remember I was driving that magnificent baby blue colored Plymouth Fury 3 that my dad had bought a couple years earlier. And it was a smooth driving car. I had just pulled up. And of course, I was listening to the radio. I was a teenager. 78 was 1 year before my mission. And I had the radio on and I heard it. And I sat there and I said, whoa, wait a minute, man. So I got out of the car, went running into the house and told my mom. I said, Mom, the prophet had a revelation. The blacks are getting the priesthood now. And she goes, oh, honey. And I go, Mom, call Dad. I just heard it on the radio. Turn on the TV. Turn on the radio. I just heard it. This is not a joke. And she goes, oh, that can't be real. Mom, call Dad. He's at the barber shop. So anyway, make a long story short, yeah, I was in my mom's driveway. So
yeah, it was a big deal. It was a big deal. Of course,
Debbie Donovan says, a beautiful car, Professor. I'm going to tell her right now, not only beautiful, it beat the snot out of my best friend's hot rod pickup in a race. It had a great motor in it, that Plymouth Fury 3. Oh, sweetest driving car I've ever drove since.
Yeah, Tim was saying it was in the assembly hall, the Salt Lake Temple. I'm not sure. Did I say the wrong thing?
No, the assembly hall room in the upper floors of the Salt Lake Temple.
Yeah,
Tim
I've been there. I've been there actually. So
really, I don't think I ever have.
Well,
Alan says he was a district leader, and his zone leader told him about it on their Friday call-in. Wow, how interesting!
Yeah, a lot of people thought it was a joke or something.
Yeah, there were a few people who did. Oh, the phone was off the hook the whole day long, according to the book. Yeah, I don't doubt it.
Yeah. So this is where I think it gets kind of interesting, because we all kind of know, I think, what happened after that. There was lots of press about it. They started changing the church manuals. They started baptizing black people and sending them to the temple. Yes.
Can I tell the Bruce R. McConkie story as soon as you're done here?
Yeah. I'll let you tell that. Oh, sure. Yeah, that's a good one. This is one of the
best part of the book for me. Sorry.
I'm telling you, if there's only one part of the book that you read, this is the part you need to read. Okay.
That will make the book worth it.
That'll make the book. But yeah, so all the news went out. Everybody's all excited, and then a little zinger happened. Take it away, backyard professor.
This didn't surprise me. I howled with laughter over this. I have to read it. I'll read parts because I wrote notes in it as well. And these notes are the immediate thought that came to my thought as I read. Oh my gosh, come on. Oh, here we go. I've got it. Okay. So The revelation has been given. The world is shocked and stunned. The world is shocked and stunned. I'm going to do like a Cardin on Word Radio and put my hat on backwards. Oh my God! Oh. I got to quit watching those guys.
Don't get codified on me.
Although I have to say, I'm impressed with their one guest, Dave Butler. He's pretty good. He's okay. I disagree with him on a lot, but he's good. Anyway, so here's the point. This feeling was real to Spencer W. Kimble, to the First Presidency, to the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, and to all the rest of the general authorities, the brethren, in the temple. This was a revelation. Okay, so, and it's really interesting, and I'll just throw this in, for Mormon feminists, the revelation was also bittersweet. If Kimble could receive a revelation to end race discrimination, they reasoned, he could also end sex discrimination by granting women priesthood. And when they asked what caused the blacks to get the priesthood, the brethren said, well, we prayed to the Heavenly Father and he gave the permission. And the women asked, well, aren't you going to pray to God about we women receiving the priesthood? And Ellen Tapper said, no, we're not. We're not even interested in praying for the women getting the priesthood. Typical. So anyway, okay, so, okay. Well, it didn't take long. I really wish I would have heard some of these rumors. It didn't take long for this revelation to gather a mystical quality. This is the best part of the book. I promise the book's worth it for this next 2 pages. So it took on a mystical quality, and it began with Bruce R. McConkie. So, Bruce R. McConkie, a few days afterward, now they were told to testify, and so Bruce R. McConkie did. He shared details of the revelation in a private family gathering at his house. Now, his sister, Margaret Pope, also known as May, and her husband, Bill, were there, as were other family members. So they're having a family home evening together, and Bruce R. McConkie is one of the 12 who was there receiving this revelation, told the family about this fantastic spiritual experience. There, the apostle explained the event of June 1st in vivid detail. He compared the revelation to the day of Pentecost at Kirtland, Ohio. This is very important because all of us, whether we're critics now, apostates, anti-Mormons, or Mormons, when you hear the name Kirtland, Ohio, you automatically think of what I'm about to read to you. This is where founding prophet Joseph Smith claimed to see angels, prophetic personages, and even Jesus Christ himself. The family pressed McConkie for details. They wanted to know if there was a rushing of great wind. That is what they would have thought, right? So, as indicated in the Doctrine and Covenants description of Kirtland, Ohio, and all he would say, and this is so McConkie, is just like Kirtland. Were there angelic choirs in the temple that day? Just like Kirtland. Were there visitors beyond the veil? Just like Kirtland. May's heart was pounding as she was scribbling names down as fast as her brother spoke, listing the possible angels and past prophets who may have visited the brethren on the day of the revelation. McConkie stopped her. I didn't say they didn't come, May. I just said I wasn't telling. So he instructed his family. He instructed his family not to embellish any part of the story, knowing full well that's exactly what they were going to do. And he has plausible deniability. I didn't say anything. I didn't say angels. I didn't say the rushing of wind, nothing. But he's with his family, see, in private. And he intimates and insinuates by, just like Kirtland. Now, of course, I wrote, oh, God. That's what I did when I read this. I went, oh, God. When I got to the part when he said he compared the revelation to the day of Pentecost to Kirtland, Ohio. So anyway, of course, we all know the story. This is how Joseph Smith did it with his revelations, you guys. We have a picture-perfect process of how revelation occurred and how it became grand and magnificent and overwhelming. Now, the brethren, in my youth, in Doug's youth, the brethren constantly, our bishop, we were struggling to get a testimony. Come on, we're kids, we're teenagers, we're skateboarding, but we're supposed to be reading these books, Bible, Book of Mormon, D&C, Pearl of Great Price, and praying about them. Okay, yeah, we'll give them 5 minutes. So we couldn't get a testimony, so we were having counsel with the bishops, and they would say, no, wait. Forget Joseph Smith's experiences. You're not going to have those experiences. What you need to do is listen for the still small voice, and it's still and it's small. So you have to be very quiet. You have to be peaceful. You have to be reverent. You have to preferably be in your dark room with your hands folded on your knees and just listening, because the Holy Ghost will whisper the truth to you. This is what everyone in the church in the 1960s and 70s were taught, and everyone in my audience right now knows this, right? So for McConkie, brethren, I testify, I teach true doctrine. It is through true doctrine that you are saved. We have true doctrine. Come on, Bruce R. McConkie, this still small whispering voice. Hell no, that's not good enough. It's gotta be overwhelmingly powerful. It has to be spiritually magnificent, but he can't say it was, so he didn't. He let his family say it.
It's like that Dennis the Menace movie where he's told not to push this button, and he's sitting there and he's trying to resist not pushing that button, but eventually he pushes the button and it causes a disaster. This is Bruce R. McConkie. He couldn't resist starting this rumor that some fantastical supernatural thing had happened. And
the reason why is because he is the foremost doctrinal apostle. This is for his enlargement of magnificence for the church to look up to. It's all about him.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, this is the first time that we've had a church leader embellish, and it's certainly not the last time, because we already know we have embellishment going on even today. But it's kind of sad, because an entire false narrative developed around these rumors, and it got picked up and enlarged every time it was told. It was like all the past presidents of the church came in, Jesus came in, They had tongues of fire over their head. I mean, it just went absolutely berserk. And you
And
can
eventually,
understand.
and here's the kicker. Here's the
Yeah,
kicker that I love.
yeah.
I'm telling you, this is too good to lose, because it's another one of my favorite apostles that joins the club, but he was actually there. The next day, McConkie's brother-in-law, Bill Pope, of course, related some of the stories at Stake Conference at BYU, of course, with the apostles' permission. That's critical. Pope told the audience that his wife stayed up till 2 o'clock typing the notes so that she could have an accurate account of Apostle McConkie's remarks. Before a crowd of hundreds of people, Pope began by explaining, brothers and sisters, this is a great day in the church. Now realize this is the brother-in-law to the man whom he's about to describe what really happened to the revelation. This elevates the whole McConkie family, because that's the point. He said, on the day of Pentecost, the Apostle Paul had a spiritual experience that resembled cloven tongues of fire. Pope then said, Apostle McConkie, who had often pondered that statement, now knew what Paul meant. For the priesthood revelation was the most spiritual experience that he ever had. Now, notice what happens here in this myth making. Dan Vogel says they're myth makers. Absolutely. In his myth making, all McConkie had to do was insinuate, all he has to do is mention a word. Kirtland, Ohio, Pentecost. Now all of a sudden, it's similar to Paul's Pentecost, and McConkie hasn't said any lie, because all he said was it was the most spiritual experience he had ever had. It's his family who's now linking Bruce R. McConkie to the Apostle Paul and his experiences. Then later on, Pope spoke at another church meeting the next day, this time his ward in Provo, and he again recounted the events, adding more several embellishments to Ann Whitten, who was in attendance. In the prayer circle revealed by the Lord, the windows of heaven were open. It was in the days of Pentecost and the Kirtland Temple era. Many members of the early church appeared, including President Joseph Smith, John Taylor, and Brigham Young. Tongues of cloven fire. But you can't make this shit up, you guys. Fell upon all the 13 men instantaneously, confirming a positive answer to President Kimble's prayer. Elder McConkie was not able to describe the scene in words. He said it was the greatest spiritual experience in his life. Get this, I'm not done. Whitten's account was confirmed by another congregant, BYU religious professor George Pace. The story was embellished by the apostle's son, Joseph Fieldings McConkie, who embellished it further. Now his own kid gets in on the game because he's a BYU professor. And hey, this is my papa. Yeah, you're looking at the professor, the most spiritual professor BYU ever had. Yeah, baby. Let me tell you what really went down. I know, I'm his kid. Here's what he said. This will blow your mind. Here we go. And it was in his quorum meeting, his priesthood quorum meeting, of course, in church at the ward in Orem, Utah. The younger McConkie said that all. Now remember, earlier it was Joseph Smith, John Taylor, and Brigham Young. Now it's all of the former prophets lined up and were present in the temple at that meeting. Joseph, echoing his father, said the revelation was just like the Pentecost at Kirtland. See, Bruce knew exactly what he was doing. The younger McConkie said that all of the apostles saw and heard the same thing. And when Spencer Kimble got a hold of this information, Guess who he called into his office onto the carpet? But wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. Similarly, McConkey's nephew, sharing details of the revelation with fellow Mormons, he told them that Elder McConkey has seen the Savior.
There it is.
Adding that the experience in the temple must have been tremendous. Furthermore, he recounted how previous church leaders had visited the temple on the day of the revelation, brethren. All of the most important leaders were there. Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, John Taylor, and many others, possibly Nephi, Alma, and Helaman. I'm adding that, but they may as well have said that. The McConkeys and the Popes were not the only ones, though, to promote. Notice how this keeps growing. Now it's past the family, right? So the notion of otherworldly visitors at the temple, Apostle Boyd K. I can't trust historians. Packer, liar for the Lord, said he contributed to the embellishment. According to one account, he declared, of course, in a church testimony meeting, of course, come on, that Jesus himself had appeared June 1st. Boyd, freaking liar, pants on fire, Packer lied that Jesus himself showed up.
I'm going to need paramedics pretty soon.
We're talking bull-loving shit here from the man who can't trust historians. And now we know why we historians can't trust you apostles. Every time from now on, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what you say. Every time you declare a revelation, we're calling bullshit because we have the historical documentation of how bullshit is spread about revelation. Now, I promised I wasn't going to go on a rant, so I'm going to calm down. But wait, I'm not done. Boyd K. Frick and I can lie with the best of them. Packer said he could now testify. He could now. Look, this is an apostle already. He's been there for a long time. Come on, Boyd. He said, I can now. Me, Boyd K., I am more spiritual than you, Packer, can testify that Jesus was a person of body parts and passions, a person of flesh and blood. Packer said that Jesus appeared to the 12 and the first presidency to express, quote, his desire to have them accept the blacks into the priesthood, unquote. Jesus himself came and told those men in that meeting what he wanted. This is the cockamamie bull roar I was raised to believe and think. To find this in this book is so validating to me of why I can't, and it's unfortunate, I'm not crowing in victory here. I can't trust these guys. This is what I was raised to believe. And now to see that Boyd K. Packer is behind part of the problem, this is astonishing.
And just the whole thing, the thing that just struck me is how quickly this distortion took hold. It was like wildfire.
In just 3 days. 3 days.
Just instantly, they were embellishing.
Still small voice to Jesus Christ, telling them all, give the blacks the priesthood in just 3 days.
And Spencer W. Kimble had an absolute hissy fit over this whole thing. He was so pissed because he had told them point blank that it was just the Spirit making them feel good and that they were not to embellish or say anything else. And guess what they did? They embellished and said a lot of other things. That's what they did. This is the BS that occurs. You can see how all these things in past church history could have, magically appeared out of what happened because people just embellished and embellished.
Embellished, man.
You know?
We've got the most beautiful example in history.
Yeah, I mean,
that, Boyd. But here's the hypocrisy. Boyd K. Packer, his more sober account was given to Spencer W. Kimble's son, Edward. Here's what Boyd K. Packer said to him. The brethren met with portraits of the presidents on the walls and said,
remember that?
Almost sense those prophets giving their approval.
There you go.
There you have it. Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, faithful members and apostates, you are being lied to deliberately, hypocritically by those who say they are special witnesses of Jesus Christ, when in reality, they're just farting wind. That's how this guy operated.
So here's what happened. So Spencer W. Kimble went berserk over this distortion.
Oh, he called Bruce right in.
Bruce, he made Bruce write a retraction, write a more faithful account, which Bruce did, and took
but
some
not
of
totally.
Well, not totally, but then
he kept fudging.
Then what happened is when Spencer W. Kimble later became more sick and weaker, basically as a leader, McConkie reintroduced the lies into his books.
Yes,
and his accounts. He
reintroduced the gravity of this. He reintroduced the lies once Kimble could not keep him truthful.
It's like refried beans. It's like refried beans, but this was refried bullshit. Okay.
Hey, that's a t-shirt, Doug.
Pulled it. He pulled it out and put it back right on the burner, right on the front burner there. And you know, this is unconscionable behavior from these guys.
Here's the thing. Absolutely. In his retraction, Bruce R. McConkie, here is what he said, because Spencer Kimble said, Bruce, Revelation needs no embellishments. There was no audible voice. No one heard a thing. And you know it. So you go out and squelch that. So here's what McConkie said to the public Mormonism, to the church. McConkie said, the accounts circulating aren't true. The revelation came about by the power of the Holy Ghost revealed to President Kimble. McConkie emphatically stated, aside from this, for all practical purposes, everything else in the document you enclosed is false. He retracted all of it except the fact that Spencer Kimble felt like it was right. None of the visitations. Jesus damn sure didn't show up, Boyd. We all know that. And therefore, he retracted it. And that's what Doug was saying. Once Kimble got too weak to oppose McConkie pulling out more stuff, McConkie pulled out more stuff. And none of the other brethren who were in that room, in that experience, contradicted what McConkie did.
Right.
None of them argued against him. They are all in on the deception just as surely as they all sustained each other after the fact came out that they've been lying to the government and the SEC, and they were fined only a couple of $1,000,000 as a slap on the hand, but they were caught. But they all sustained each other as being prophets, seers, and revelators when it isn't a human failure. It's not a mistake they've made. This is their method. This is their way of life. And that's why it's so important.
And this is why when Bill Reel and RFM did their episode on the embellishments that we're seeing from church leaders, you should pay attention, because we have a history of this. We see it right here. It's proven right
Absolutely
here.
Proven right here. I'm not kidding, man. There it is. You got to get this book.
All right. So let's move on.
Doug, we're at 2 hours.
Are we? Okay. Let's see.
Not that I'm,
let's wrap it up.
I love the way you're doing this and your analysis, and so does the crowd. They're telling me to shut up because I'm getting too excited, but you have at it.
Oh, okay. No,
I'm kidding. They're not.
Okay. So, several things happened after the ban was rescinded. First of all, black peoples, they got sealed in the temple. They became church leaders. The kids had the Aaronic priesthood. For all intents and purposes, every blessing was opened up to them, which is fantastic. However, it didn't really solve all the problems, because there was still racism in the church, and the members of the church that were black were very often treated differently and as second-class citizens. And there's lots of heartbreaking stories over this. The other thing that was not taken care of by the revelation was interracial marriage. That was not addressed.
Well, before that, there is one smaller item. Several of the LDS people, the BYU scholars and all, asked the brethren, where is the revelation?
Yeah.
All revelations are written down. That's why we have the Doctrine and Covenants.
They wouldn't give them one.
We have the fact that you received a revelation. Where is it? And they never did produce it.
Nope, they never produced it. They said the official declaration is all. So anyway, yeah. So the interracial marriage was not addressed, and that came from Mark E. Peterson. When they called him to tell him about the revelation, he said, "I agree to it, but you need to put in there that this does not apply to interracial marriage, that we still oppose." And they agreed. And they agreed to that.
They agreed. One man has a suggestion, and they all agreed.
Couldn't completely come clean with this thing. But the church did start doing things to sort of try to remedy the inequalities and the racism in the church. Number one, they stopped talking about the civil rights movement and those leaders as communists. They stopped that kind of malarkey. They also endorsed the Martin Luther King holiday, which had been Utah was the last state to endorse that. They did that. They dropped in the temple ceremony, the old one had Satan appear and as a black man. They dropped that. They acknowledged that there had been racism in the past, and they, tried to get people to stop being racist. I mean, there were conference talks that came out about it. They also strengthened their relationship with the NAACP, although the NAACP still wasn't really super happy with them, because they never really got black professors, on the staff at their schools. No. It was just a really hard thing for them to do. They had been racist so long. Nobody wanted to go there. And a lot of black students, there's still a very low number of black students. And we've seen from BYU campus, the Black Menace group, who went around doing videos about how difficult it is to be a Black person on campus even today. So,
well, it's only been 46 years, and they still, isn't it? They only have one, maybe two Black general authorities.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I mean, it's the church is still the leadership and
it's
what
still
have
a
you.
white boys club. Yeah.
So White Boys Club. The other thing that they did, they did the Freedmen's Bank genealogy thing. So a lot of the slaves in the South, there weren't records for them except at this bank that had been formed for the freed slaves to put their money in, and they digitized all those records, and it became a real important part of the genealogy for Black Americans. In 2010, they dropped finally. In 2010, think about this.
2010. Now, look, that's 78 to 88, 98, 2008, 910. We're talking 32 years. You just need to wrap your mind around this. 32 years after the revelation. Okay, take it away, Doug.
They dropped the book Mormon Doctrine. They took it out of print. Finally.
It was still a bestseller.
Still a bestseller. I have a copy of it. I'm almost every Mormon family has a copy of this book.
And the reason why is because they kept quoting it. The Mormons would go to church and kept quoting it, saying, well, you may have the priesthood, but you're still lesser than we are. You weren't valiant in the pre-existence. You were offensive. They still kept the racism from Broussard. I can lie with the best of the prophets, McConkie. He kept saying everything negative about blacks, and the church kept repeating it, even after the priesthood was given to them.
Right. They even had BYU professors. Randy Bott was one of them, who blithely on national television quoted all the old racist doctrines. Said, yeah, blacks were, in not valid in the pre-existence. Yeah, I mean, he just quoted the whole thing right on national TV, and this was not that long ago. That caused an uproar. The other thing that happened, which is unfortunate, and I think we all saw this, was Jonathan Streeter. So Jonathan Streeter was a blogger, and he decided, and he was against racism, but he decided what he would do is write a mock apology from the church, because the church has never apologized. And this is something that really infuriates the Black members of the church. They've had little hints of apology.
Rightly so.
The church has never come back out and just actually apologize. And so Streeter wrote this fake apology from the church and posted online. Well, people thought it was real. I mean, it was beautifully written, actually. I mean,
yeah, it was.
People thought that this came from the church, and people were in tears. They were crying. And then all of a sudden they found out that
they felt the Holy Ghost telling them, "At last, our leader has done the right thing."
And then it turned out to be a fake, and that just devastated them. And there's been a recent podcast on that. I think it was Bill Reel. I think Bill
so.
Did a recent podcast and had Jonathan Streeter on. So anyway, so the church still isn't out of the woods. They've done better. They have a new relationship with NAACP. But one thing that was left out of the book that surprised me was the church had a celebration of the lifting of the ban called the B1 event. And they had all kinds of Black performers there and speakers. And Dallin Oaks was one of the speakers. And when Dallin Oaks got up, he started talking about the ban. And he started talking about the origins of the ban. He said, I never got an answer to my prayers about this. But he said, I figured that follow the brethren has never stood me wrong. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'll just follow the brethren. Well, by doing that, he undid a big portion of what the Race and the Priesthood essay had done. The Race and the Priesthood essay is the closest thing we've ever had to an absolute disavowal of the racist doctrines that seem to linger that were put forth by Bruce R. McConkie and others. And Dallin Oaks did incalculable damage by making that statement. So they're still looking for an apology. I don't think it'll happen during Dallin Oaks' administration if he becomes the next prophet.
Because now everybody follows him.
My hope is that Dieter F. Uchtdorf becomes the prophet, that he'll have at least a short term as the prophet. And I think he would have the guts to do it, to actually make a real apology. But anyway, that's it. The book is incredible. Go buy it.
One more thing. I promise I won't get too energetic. However, I probably undid all your good stuff by ranting and raving. I apologize.
No, he did not. It's fine.
I do want to share this one thing that really helped give some respect, in my opinion, back to Gordon B. Hinckley, even though Mark Hoffman made a complete fool of him. At least Gordon B. Hinckley is the one leader with the balls to do the right thing.
I know what you're talking about. And this is very important. Yeah, this is very important.
Very important. There is the hero on this subject. Here's what happened. 3 years later, in 2004, Hinckley made another diplomatic gesture to the Black community when he met with Reverend Cecil Murray of the African Methodist Episcopalian Church in Los Angeles. Murray recounted this event. As we sat around the conference table, Hinckley apologized for the role the church had played in participating in slavery. He says, "I have learned of the background of your church and the founding of your church, and I want to apologize for whatever role the Mormon church has played, not only there, but has played in racism in America." I said, "I thank you very much for making that statement. It is certainly true that the Mormon church has been a factor in discrimination, but you've done so much good. And now to hear these words, I would certainly say that your hearts are right. If the Mormon leaders would just apologize, they would solve 1 trillion problems all at once. This is the effect. This is the effect you can have on people when you care, when you love them, like Jesus said to do, instead of stand there and say, "We have no need to apologize. We are always correct, and the rest of you can kiss off." Dallin Oaks, you're part of the problem, not the solution. Follow the example. Stand for something, is what Gordon B. Hinckley said. And what did he stand for in that apology? The common humanity of man and womankind. He stood for the fact that an apology heals, and he stood for the fact that these people are exactly like us, and if we want to be loved, we ought to love them. If we want to become good neighbors, then let us begin with that very necessary apology, of which not one of you chicken shits have ever repeated yet. We're waiting. Now, if it was my show when I was all alone, here's where I'd shut it off. But I do want to let you wrap this up, Doug.
Yeah, all I want to say is that I think in these situations, and what you just read, very touching, but it also highlights to me that the real saints, the real heroes here, are the Black members of the church and other Black leadership. They have set an example of what it really means to follow Christ and to forgive and to move on. And the whites, we're still lacking. We have a long way to go yet.
The last will be first and the first shall be last. Aren't the apostles and prophets going to be blown away when they go to get into that upper tier of the celestial kingdom with their wives, when everybody there has already beat them that are black and yellow and red? Because if they're going to make a big deal about skin color, it's going to cost them their exaltation, because if the doctrine is true, God himself made all of man and womankind. Humanity is made in God's image. If you're going to make a big deal about skin color or your political preferences or which religion you belong to, you're only going to take yourself down instead of seeing all as God's children. I think, hopefully, Mormonism can correct this in the future and begin to show that they've corrected it, not just talk about it. That would be my hope.
Actions, not words, actions. That's what we need.
All right. We can end on that. Thank you. That's what you say it so much better and more succinctly than I ever can. So thank you, Doug, for being on the show. I know our audience has greatly appreciated you. I've been reading the comments as we're going along, and they're all just saying, "Oh, I didn't know that. Good point, Doug. Thank you. You're intelligent. You're marvelous. You're amazing." I don't want to tell you that, though, because it'll swell your fat head.
Yeah.
And I want you to keep on my show. Come on. You saw that one coming. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. We appreciate all your support, all of your comments, and you guys being in the chat and enjoying the show. I want to thank you again, Doug Vincent. We'll get together for more shows. I know they've really loved having you, and so have I. So in the meantime, remember, be good, do well, have fun, make lots of friends, and be a friend. We'll catch you guys next Sunday night live. Woohoo!